My name's Jerod Huebner. I'm the Director of Prairie Management for the Missouri Prairie Foundation, and we're here today with Jane to check out her property. She's been doing a lot of invasive species management on her property, as well as native prairie and woodland species reconstructions and restorations. So Jane, would you like to show us around today?
I'd love to.
So tell me a little bit about your property.
Okay, my husband and I built our home here. This was the family farm that I grew up on. So I've lived here my whole life. So we currently own 15 acres. So we left it to be wildlife habitat. The issue with that was we weren't aware of invasives. It was when we bought my sister's additional 6 acres, leading to the 15, that we walked the property and realized it was full of plants that I didn't recognize. That's when we learned about bush honeysuckle and multiflora rose. So bush honeysuckle had just come up and done this and choked out every young oak in those woods. There was none. And the multiflora rose, especially right behind that pond there was a bush as big as our house. Wow. So that took some time to really attack and get after. My husband and I looked like we were herding cats when we got done with that, bleeding from every part of our body, but we became very good at it. So the good news is, Jerod, these bushes aren't as massive as you know they can get.
Yeah, the bush honeysuckle.
Massive. Now they're small sprouts. So in the spring, we walk through because they green up before everything else, so it's really easy to just pull them, especially when the ground's wet. This time of year in the summer, I generally just stem treat them because I find that the quickest thing. So I just cut them off and dab with the sponge on this bottle. Yeah. So
that's a great way to not kill everything else around it as well. So.
Exactly. And this just fits in my pack. So, and that way I walk around and I get to enjoy the property. I don't have to carry a big sprayer, but I'm still getting rid of those little things that I see.
Right.
The amazing part of all of this has been the change in the property. The amount of birds, butterflies, and wildlife we see has just been amazing. And I'm sure you see that on the prairies.
Oh yeah, for sure. Having the variations in habitat, woodland, savanna, some prairie species just creates the habitat for different suites of birds to kind of call this place home instead of just having one habitat type. So it really diversifies your bird population that can utilize your property.
Yeah, it was a lot of work, but I have never doubted for a second that it was worth it.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the wildlife on your property.
Oh, we have a deer that has 2 fawns. They're usually laying behind the pond down there.
Okay.
I had a rabbit last night, chipmunks galore.
Okay.
And wild turkey, we see quite a bit of that. We never saw that before.
Okay.
Now we see that, and of course, we've got the bird diversity has just grown immensely.
Here's some really nice liatris in bloom.
Yeah, some blazing star. Yeah, we're lucky. Year 3, we're starting to see that come up now.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, Jerod, this is an area that we planted, and I'm getting a lot of sassafras coming up. Is that a problem, or is that okay?
So once you remove some of the invasives like the bush honeysuckle and autumn olive and other of the non-native invasive plants that we have in the state, some of these native species like the sassafras are going to come up and thrive. You've created open spaces for them for their seeds to germinate and live. Typically with your prescribed burning that you're doing, some limited spot treatment, these things are really easy to control.
Great.
The seed bank isn't just packed with these like it is the invasive. So just in a couple of years of prescribed burns and, like I say, a little bit of chemical treatment in the thicker patches, these really won't persist long term,
Right.
especially with the native species that you've planted here. So I noticed you got some Queen Anne's lace and a little bit of mullein.
Yes, the mullein I generally pull. Is that a problem to have? Because I know it's not native, right?
Right, and the Queen Anne's lace is similar. It's going to be a biennial, so it's going to be prolific the first couple of years when you've got a disturbed area where you've treated the non-natives out. it's going to come in kind of like ragweed. Typically with competition and prescribed burning, it just goes away over time without treating. The mullein is fine to pull,
Okay.
Especially if you have large patches of it. It'll get the really tall flower and
Yes.
lots of seeds on that stalk. So breaking those off before they produce the seed can be helpful just in reducing it in a quicker time period. But again, usually with native competition from the planted species here, it's just going to go away on its own over time.
Oh, good.
Mowed through here. Is there any particular reason you were doing the mowing?
When it came up this year, the bulk of it was Queen Anne's lace, and there were some grasses and ragweed. So we just felt it best to mow it in order to give the young plants under it some sunlight.
Yeah, typically that's a good management practice for establishing the native plants that you've seeded in the first 2 or 3 years of a planting. Typically there's going to be some mowing involved, and so like you say, it just reduces the seed stock from the weedier type plants and allows those natives to get more sunlight, also use water resources a little bit better. So
Jerod, I think we've got some tall fescue here. What do you recommend to control that?
So typically, you can tell just from the really glossy leaves and the seed heads here. Typically you don't want it to go to seed, so this seed is going to fall to the ground and wash downhill from it on this site, and your fescue problem will get larger as the years goes on. So fescue is kind of nice in the fact that it stays green through the winter months, and so most of the other native vegetation, some of your wild rye or river oats, things that would typically be in a woodland setting, are going to be dormant and brown. So even in early December, late November, after a couple of frosts, you can come in with just glyphosate at about a 2% rate and spot spray your clumps of the tall fescue, and that'll eliminate it. So here's some multiflora rows, and you mentioned you treated the large ones out of your woodland.
Correct.
In the past, and so typically on a site you're only 15 acres or so. There's always going to be invasives surrounding you if neighboring landowners aren't treating invasives on their property, or it's coming from roadsides, fence rows, things like that. This one is going to be quite invasive, so if you don't take the steps to treat it, it will spread fairly rapidly. The birds love the seeds on it, and they'll transport those. You do have to be careful. There is a native prairie rose species that will grow in openings like this. Yes. and throughout the prairies. One way you can tell the difference between the native and the invasive one is these fringe stipules. So at the base of this leaf stalk, there's fringes on those stipules right up against the stalk of the plant. So the fringe stipules indicates that it's the invasive one, and you're good to treat it. Here's going to be one of the native roses, and it generally looks very similar. The stem is a little bit different colored, but that's not always the case. But again, if you look at the stipules on the leaves, you can see that those stipules there are smooth, and so it's one of the good native ones.
No fringe. Awesome. So further up here, we were dealing with winter creeper, which has been a multi-year process like many of the invasives. When I found the vines growing up the trees and then started seeing the plant here, I knew what we were dealing with. We have several patches of it. So the first thing I did was cut it off the tree, so I stopped the seeding. Exactly. Because if I understand it right, winter creeper seeds when it climbs a tree. When it goes vertical. Yeah. So the first thing I did was cut and treat, stem treat all the climbing part. Then we did a spray and a burn, which has set it back. So then this winter, I intend to do it again. Yeah. Because the one thing about winter creeper, if I'm right, is that it stays green all winter long. Right. So I can treat this in the winter and not do damage to all the surrounding native vegetation. Right.
Yeah, so the winter creeper is going to be like that. The bush honeysuckle, as well as the Japanese honeysuckle, things like tall fescue, those are kind of some of the better invasives to be able to find in the dormant season and still be able to treat them when most of the natives are dormant. So you know, this winter creeper that's through here, and I can see all these stems, you know, it's just like a carpet. Well, all of these other native surrounding plants are going to be dormant, so just a treatment with like something like glyphosate is going to do a really good job on the winter creeper and not kill your natives. So yeah, you can tell you've done a great job. And
Yeah,
these
this
invasives
was,
always take follow-up work, you know, several years, especially on something like winter creeper. And even once you've got your populations under control, like we mentioned earlier, there's always going to be, you know, influx of
Right.
seed from outside sources off of your property. And so just you walking the property throughout the growing season, looking for the few scattered plants that come up from year to year is going to be important going forward. So with this winter creeper, you can see that it has this thick leaf, and it develops a really waxy leaf surface. And so especially with this, but really with any invasive, it's really important to use surfactants in your herbicide. And that just allows the herbicide to stay on the leaf longer and infiltrate through the leaf surface, through that waxy layer. A lot of times you'll even kind of up the rate of surfactant to the higher rate, around 0.5%, just to make sure you get that herbicide into the plant and it doesn't sit on the leaf surface and run off.
Now, Jerod, I know not everybody can burn, but we've seen great response from fire on our prairie. Is that something you all recommend?
Yeah, so historically all of these landscapes would have evolved with fire, and so the natives are adapted to fire. A lot of your woody species that you don't want on a, you know, an oak hickory type setting, savanna setting, they're not adapted to fire, so that helps suppress those. A lot of our invasive species can help your treatment method, you know, your herbicide treatment can be assisted through prescribed fire. In a savanna setting, you know, it's great to burn it every 3 to 5 years, sometimes more often, just depending on what your goals are and what problems you have you're trying to deal with. The burning typically usually only helps that. Things like Sericea lespedeza are actually, the seed is stimulated by fire, and so it can help that seed germinate so you can treat it and get it out of the seed bank a little bit quicker. And so you can really use it as a management tool to speed up your management and get the results that you want in a quicker time period. If you can't do prescribed burning, you know, you've got some houses around here, it's a fairly small site, especially if it's a really urban site. If you can't do prescribed burning, sometimes mowing can be really important as a management tool, just to kind of set back some of the growth. It helps chop up some of the thatch, and allows those natives a better chance to come through.
Okay.
Yeah, and chopping that thatch up will help it decompose a little quicker. So if you're not burning and this grass, that thatch and leaf litter gets really, really thick, it's going to suppress a lot of the natives. So burning or mowing is generally a common management practice for a native setting like this. You don't want to mow it 3 times a year, obviously. That's going to turn it into a sod like a yard.
Right.
But just every couple of years, probably rotate, either do a burn or mow if you cannot burn.
I don't have a lot of Sericea, but I do have it in a few patches, and here's one of them.
Yeah, so the Sericea lespedeza, it's one of our worst invaders on the prairies and grassland systems. It will get into woodlands and savannas as well. There is a native that looks similar called slender lespedeza. The leaf venation is quite a bit different. So the Sericea lespedeza is going to have more of a fishbone, herringbone pattern. If you take the leaves and hold them up to the sunlight, the venation is almost perfectly fishbone looking. Whereas the native slender lespedeza, the leaf is a little bit different. The plant overall looks different, but the leaf venation is going to look more like webbed between the herringbone. So much more going on within the venation of the slender lespedeza compared to the Sericea. But this is a prolific seeder like most of the invasives. It can grow in about any type of ecosystem, and it thrives no matter what the conditions are. So it's really important to stay ahead of this. So I noticed you have a patch of pokeweed here. I know a lot of landowners will get nervous about this and kind of worry about treating it. It's one of those kind of like ragweed. There's a disturbed area here, you know, kind of a spoil pile from some of the work you've done on your property. And this is where this plant thrives. It also likes to grow in brush piles. The birds love the seeds on it. You can see it grows these berries on it.
Yeah.
It's a native plant. It's not a problem at all, so I don't ever worry about treating it.
Okay.
It's not one that's going to drop seed and just spread all over the place.
Okay.
It typically is restricted to those
disturbed areas.
kind of disturbed or degraded spots of the property. And like I say, it's a native species, so not one to worry about.
Great. So Jerod, when we started out, this was nothing but multiflora and this was nothing but bush honeysuckle.
The invasive species, they're going to spread a lot of times the thistles through wind. A lot of things like Sericea will spread down hills with water flow. Birds can carry seeds and deposit them anywhere on the landscape. The woodland next door is kind of a thinned, somewhat managed woodland, and so it just really helps influence some of your neighbors and overall reduce the spread of invasives on the landscape. So Jane, when you started your invasives treatment and your management on this property, I know it's overwhelming for a lot of landowners, especially like you say, this was just completely choked out with underbrush of invasives. Where did you kind of get your information, or what resources did you utilize to learn about the treatment methods and what was invasive, what was native, things like that?
Well, there's some great websites that helped us out. The MOIP, Missouri Invasive Plant Council, that was a great place to go to learn pictures of the invasives so we could figure out exactly what we had. We used that. There's on the Missouri Prairie Foundation site, there's a herbicide information that you put up there. Right. That was our Bible for treatment and knowing how to treat things. So that was extremely helpful and something we used all the time. Right. And my husband and I just picked an area, and we started with one area. Okay. And then when we saw that difference, then we moved on and just kept going. And it's when you see the changes happening, it's easy to get motivated to keep going.
It is impressive what you've done with the property, considering it was once completely choked out with invasives. So currently, what would you estimate your time spent, like in a week, just walking through and looking or treating invasives? Well,
back when we were clearing, it was a lot, but now I just walk it every day, a different little path, and I enjoy walking anyway. Yeah. So not nearly as much time, and we try to burn one little section a year. Right. But we're probably talking just maybe five hours a week right now.
Eliminating the invasives is very important. They're so aggressive, the seed is very prolific, it's long-lived in the seed bank usually, and so in order to have these native plants that we're trying to promote thrive, we've got to get rid of these invasives, otherwise they're going to tend to choke out all of the native vegetation on the landscape. The seed is long-lived. Typically there's lots and lots of seeds in the seed bank that can be coming from surrounding land. And so it's a continual process that takes a lot of time. Just in a short period of time though, especially when you eradicate really dense patches of invasive species, you will see those native species starting to come on and thrive. You'll see the native wildlife, things like pollinators, grassland birds, other bird species. You'll see those start to be attracted to the natives that are, coming up since the removal of the invasive. So it's very important to the health of the ecosystem.
Here are some of the tools we've been using. This is a sprayer, a brush killer. We use Remedy mostly. This is our Roundup or glyphosate. It's generally 2% that we use in here, and that's for spraying some of the bigger things. I carry this with me in my little bag that I carry. This is just 20% glyphosate with little snippers, so for stem treating, small things. This is my root docker I use for bush honeysuckle to get in there and pull those roots up. They're fairly shallow rooted. This thing works great to get rid of those. And then for cutting multiflora, sometimes you want to get back as far as you can from that bush. So this one extends because of the thorns. That comes in handy, and just for cutting smaller things. And then this is my electric chainsaw. So it's a mini chainsaw that I use. I don't want to carry my husband's big one, but this one works for me, and it's got about a 6-inch bar, which gets most of the bigger things. So Anytime I go out, I do include my rubber gloves with me, and that's to protect myself from these herbicides, making sure, again, safety first, and always read the labels and make sure you're doing the right thing for the right invasive.
So just removing the invasives here kind of sets the stage for surrounding landowners to start removing invasives. So they can see what's happening on Jane's property. They see not only the pretty flowers, but see the deer. She's mentioned surrounding neighbors love to come here and just see the deer. She's got multiple birds nesting on her property, lots of butterflies. And so when people see things other than just a few flowers, they see the wildlife respond. It has larger implications across the landscape, and so it kind of signals to them that, hey, if we do that on our property too, our property can support this, rich, diverse wildlife that she has on her site.